comes down to a fight between you and me, then you are doomed to lose. Keep the red flag flying here.
Hello and welcome to Socialist Think Tank. We've got a brilliant lineup of guests for you tonight on what has been quite a frustrating day and an absolutely brilliant day in others for me, because I've been to Easington Miners Picnic, which was really, really nice. We managed to go up and nearly get blown away by carrying a banner that my children turned into a sail by holding onto the bottom of it. Never hold onto the bottom of a banner in a gale. It's really, really, it's dangerous. It's genuinely dangerous. We nearly went flying. But anyway, that was really nice, and it was nice to have some solidarity while we were there. We got some interesting news about Ken Loach. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But we don't want to dwell on all that negativity that that some of us might have been feeling today. We are going to introduce you to some absolutely brilliant guests. Please do get involved in the chat, by the way. Don't forget to share this stream as you are going. But firstly, I'm going to come to Jane, who you will have seen before. Hi, Jane. How are you doing?
Hiya, I'm good, thank you. So I'm Jane. I'm from the Socialist Think Tank Southeast branch, which we're just starting up. And yeah, that's really exciting. And we've got a few ideas that we're just working on with that at the moment. So that's been good.
Yeah, it's a pretty exciting time, so I'm sure there'll be some really good things coming through there. And next, I am going to who do you think I should choose next? I'll go to Klaudia next.
Hi, so I'm Klaudia from Bywire News and the Independent Media Association.
And it's short and sweet, that one. Is there anything you've been up to lately?
Oh my God. We're in the process, the Independent Media Association is in the process of bringing new independent media partners on as partners. And then from there on, we're trying to get them into the Bywire plugin, which is something interesting that Bywire has been working on. And if you want to find out more, just head to Bywire News.
That sounds really exciting. And we're not going to comment on the IMA and new people being brought into that, because it's all... we're involved anyway. So and finally, Yvette, it's really nice to have you on here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, so I'm Yvette. I'm one of the coordinators of the Justice4Grenfell campaign. We set up in the aftermath of the fire. I've lived in North Kensington where the fire happened for nearly 40 years. Still suffer from kind of the trauma of that night. And lots of social justice issues that come out of that in the society that we live in today that are still not being addressed. And I too went to a miners' festival a couple of weeks ago, Dave, but didn't have the honour of carrying any of the banners, so didn't get the experience of feeling like I was being blown away, but blown away in other ways. So yeah, absolutely brilliant. Look forward to going to many more. It's the place to be. That's what real community is.
I actually saw your speech and it was incredible. I'm not sure whether I didn't see the whole lot, but I saw it edited into this really lovely piece, and it was absolutely amazing. I'm thinking, you were half an hour away from me. I should have been there. I should have seen it. I didn't. It was brilliant. We could have met in person, and I'm really kicking myself for not being there now. But anyway, it was a brilliant speech, and you're always welcome up here to do more. Maybe next year at the big Miners Gala, where I think that's going to be the party to end all parties, to be honest. I think everyone's going to have them.
Yeah, we've got big plans for that, so watch out. Okay,
Excellent.
We're thinking of doing a Notting Hill Carnival Gala mashup there next year.
That sounds absolutely amazing. That sounds really, really good. I can't wait to see like what people from the from the mining communities are going to think when you bring Notting Hill up here. It's going to be amazing.
And then they're going to come to us. So yeah, it's all good. And let's hope it works out. Let's put Michael Gove and Boris Johnson in their places, because they seem to think that they held the two biggest festivals. So we'll let them know how big it could really be.
Yeah, they pretended that they came from Durham, didn't they? Because Durham's still Labour, but yeah. So the theme of tonight's show is justice, and I think a lot of people are feeling that that sense of injustice. And I think one of the biggest stories of injustice in the UK over the past couple of years has been Grenfell. So really, I'd really like an update on what's going on with Grenfell, but we do have some like international listeners as well. We have people from around the world, and we don't like to ever assume that everyone knows anything. So from the start, would you mind like giving us a history of Grenfell and what happened there and how it felt to be sort of involved in that community at the time and subsequently?
Okay, so Grenfell sits in North Kensington. Kensington and Chelsea is one of the richest boroughs in the country. But there is a north-south divide in the borough. On the lead up to the fire, there were threats to kind of close down our library, threats to close down our local further education college. They'd shut down a nursery that had been there for years. So really kind of pushing the community to the margins. And then in terms of housing, there was mainly kind of charitable landlords or the local authorities' housing stock. And we were saying they were willfully neglecting those properties, so running those properties down so much with damp, vermin, whatever else disgusting things you could think of. And then they would move those people out of the area, so to places like Milton Keynes, Peterborough, Stoke-on-Trent. So we were saying, they were cleansing the area of diversity and class. And why did we say that? Well, we say that because if you can afford to buy a home in Kensington, you can afford to buy a home anywhere in Britain. And then every year we would get this constant threat around the carnival, new people moving in saying it was too noisy. So why live here in the first place? If you can buy here, buy somewhere else. Linking the carnival to crime as the prime motive. So this is all happening. 5 days before the fire, we have a general election. And for the first time in the borough's history, we vote in our first Labour MP ever. It's only by 20 votes, but that sends a strong message out that something was happening in this borough and change was gratefully needed. So I'm called to the fire on the night because a friend of mine lives in the walkways which run underneath the tower. She'd been evacuated. By the time I got there, it was probably the fire was up on about the 6th floor, but we generally have had fires in the tower blocks down here before, and they've usually stayed compartmentalised. So thought nothing of it. And the horror that unfolded that night, it stays with you forever. We're 50 months on to the day. And sometimes it feels like it did happen a long time ago. Sometimes it feels like it still happens yesterday. And the community is still getting over that trauma. So we would, on the day, by the end of the first day, we were told 3 people had died. And we were saying that cannot be the case because by then new people were missing. We'd all witnessed people kind of, at the windows in the tower, were screaming for them to come out. the local authority doesn't turn up. It's the community that has to organise itself in some form of relief pattern. We always say we were running the Republic of Ladbroke Grove down here on the day because no one came to help us. We set up the relief and donation centres. There's rumour that the local authority were down destroying files down at the town hall, but I wasn't there to witness that. I was working out of a relief centre. But I did know, looking at the tower, and people need to know that that tower burnt for 60 hours. So we were walking around the area, seeing aspects of the cladding, charred cladding up the road. So everybody knew the cladding played a part in it. Originally, the tower had been condemned for demolition. That's a bad estate it was in. But then they decided to refurbish it. And they did a cost-cutting project. So by then, council housing stock had been moved under the auspices of the tenant management organisation. And I think outsourcing and privatisation, which are issues I can hope we can really touch on later, play a huge part in what happened at Grenfell, because there's no accountability. Once a public service goes into the hands of private industry, that's all about making profit and money. The quality of care and the duty of care to the public that it serves goes out the window. And we see this with care homes, we see it with academies. Whenever it goes into private hands, the service to us becomes poor and downtrodden. So I hope we can touch on that later on. So the tenant management organisation, and we know these facts now because we're in phase 2 of the public inquiry, where we can see, they're quite honest to say, we gave contracts to our mates, we threw in a bit of free lunch, all these kind of things. So these contracts are given. They cost cut on the cladding. We've worked out, so they saved £126,000, and that's just over £1,500 per person that died. So 72 people died, we know, at least. And that's what they saved money on. We know that the cladding and the insulation, there were false fire certificates produced, false fire tests done that could just get through. We know now some of those companies gave donations to particular parties. We also had to witness at the beginning of phase 2 of the inquiry that they asked for immunity from prosecution from the oral evidence that they were going to give to the inquiry. And I was in there that day, and, the bereaved families in particular, it was too much for them to bear. It was a real slap in the face. And it was a real slap in the face because the inquiry had chosen to start with what happened on the night of the fire first, rather than leaving it till the middle and doing the lead up to the fire. They chose. And what did they do? They threw the firefighters under the bus for phase 1. And I'm going to say here tonight, the firefighters are due to give evidence again. And I think, all working people up and down the country really need to be out, whether it's on social media or if you can get down to the inquiry and be giving the firefighters our support on that day, because they responded to the fire, to an unprecedented fire. And for them to have got the blame is appalling. This kind of treatment of us have to stop. So you can actually see where the public inquiry is going. And I think that's something we also need to touch on, that is, why do we have public inquiries? In whose interest of justice do we have them? Because we've seen what happened with the Hillsborough verdict recently, where they actually said, well, inquiries are not a legal entity. So why are we having them? Because we thought they were about truth, accountability and justice. And it's clearly not the way. Three of the things I'm going to touch on is the social inequality, because we said at the beginning, this is about, an unequal society. It shows us what social inequality really is. The public inquiry refused to look at issues of race and class, and have still refused to look at that. We've just in phase 2 managed to get them to look at disability, because of the lack of personal evacuation plans. So we argue that, when you have somebody with mobility issues or using a wheelchair on the 21st floor of a building where the lifts are shit, they're signing a death warrant, not a tenancy agreement. So they've managed to kind of push that through. But race and class, they just will not look at. And we're just like, look at the people who live there. Look at who you chose to house there. Look at the 72 that died. You cannot help but see race as a factor. And they were all working people, contrary to what the media put out on the days following the fire, where they made it look as if, they were benefit scroungers, they were illegal immigrants. Do you know what I mean? They come here, they couldn't be bothered to speak English. All the worst negative stereotypes that we've had here for decades, possibly centuries, came into force via the media. After that, to say it was almost like the deserving and undeserving poor. And I think for me, the crunch for me is that the former tenants, the former residents of that building complained about the refurbishment all the way along, and they were deemed to be troublemakers and agitators. We also know that actually, if they hadn't put the cladding up, and the cladding is only put up for aesthetic reasons alone, it was not originally part of the refurbishments, which was decent bathrooms, decent kitchens, a decent heating system. They put the cladding on to make it look pretty for those in the south of the borough, so that the tower block was not a blight on their eye line. And if they hadn't have put the cladding up, if they'd have left it in its original state when it was built in the early 1970s, that fire would never have happened.
So I really don't know where to go with that, because it's so big. But I think what I'm really taking from that and what you're saying is this is systemic. This isn't an incident, and I think people would love to think that this was a single tragic incident that we can all go out and go, wasn't it dreadful? And let's remember those poor victims of this, which, we see this in all sorts of areas of society, don't we? When actually there's a systemic problem here that has led to this. And you talked about privatization and you talked about all these other things, and it's the system of capitalism, to be honest, where people are trying to take money out of every situation and eke out every little bit of money from every situation rather than caring about one another. I'm not going to go on any further about that because I'd like to bring in Klaudia. So Klaudia.
I just want to thank you so much, Yvette, for that, because that was for anyone who's not familiar with what happened at Grenfell, that was a great explanation. I just wanted to also point out that correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's been 4 years and people are still in temporary housing. I think that's what blows my mind the most. It's like, first of all, there was millions of pounds raised, and it took years for them to receive not even all of the money yet. And it's like you said, it's systemic. And the problem is the fact that Grenfell happened and there's still an estimated over 200,000 flats in the UK that have got this style cladding in them, all being in, of course, poorer communities. It's disgusting, and I don't really know what else to say. Grenfell, I think 19 when Grenfell happened. I had a lot of friends who lived around the area. A lot of them were putting up videos on social media. So I was seeing it real time as it was happening. I don't think anyone expected it to be as big as it was. Like, I remember people posting videos of the fire being like, oh, what the fuck is going on, guys? Is anyone seeing this fire in West London? And then days after, you were still seeing videos of the fire happening. And it was just like, why why is the local government and the central government not doing anything? And the only help that people received was from the community. I saw so many people on social media, young people, older people, coming together being like, oh, if you want to drop off food or clothes to people at Grenfell, this is a drop-off location, go here, go there. And I honestly, if it wasn't for the community, like the strength of the community, I don't think, I think the number of deaths probably would have been higher. And it's astonishing to think that like 4 years on, people haven't been rehoused, people haven't been offered the mental health support that they need. I think the other day, even I watched an interview on Lied Bible, and they had a firefighter who was actually went into Grenfell to help some of the survivors speaking, and obviously big up the firefighters, nothing against them, but he mentioned the fact that he was really grateful to the local government and stuff like that, because they had offered him support for had gone into Grenfell. And I was watching it and I was like, okay, but what about all of the people that survived Grenfell? What about all of the people that lost someone during Grenfell? I guarantee they haven't been offered the same kind of support. So it's just a very strong symbol of like the division between rich and poor in this country.
I think it's absolutely shocking. I mean, one of the things I failed to mention was the day that Grenfell caught fire, our local authority was sitting on £274 million in its reserves. So that there is no need to cut anything. You should be generous. We still do have a few people in temporary housing. There's still one in emergency accommodation, actually, in a hotel. But the council made out that they were buying new housing stock to house the survivors. But actually, those houses have just gone back under the control of the local authority. It's gone back into their stock. So they're actually charging the very survivors. And I don't want to laugh, but sometimes when I speak, I just think this is almost fictional. So who the survivors now pay rent back to the local authority, but they just pay the rent that they would have been paying in Grenfell Tower. So they think they've done something really nice. So underneath it all, nothing has changed. I mean, we say at best they treat us with indifference, but at its worst, this is real contempt and exploitation of communities like ours up and down the country. And as you said, we quickly then discover that buildings up and down the country are covered in this disgusting material. Why it's on the market, we don't know. What other possible thing could it be used for? We can't think of that. And then you see, a fire safety bill and a building safety bill go up and down from the House of Commons to the House of Lords, where they're just like, no, we're not going to do any amendments to that. And actually now we're going to do something a little bit for you. We're going to give you up to 15 years for you to individually claim off your insurers if you have got that cladding on your building. And we're going to put you through a big complex application system so that you can apply for peanuts to take that off your building. How people sleep at night. And we've just come through a pandemic. We've all been, I always say, locked up rather than locked down. There's people having to pay for wardens to walk around their buildings just in case a fire happens, so that those people will wake them up at night. And we're living in 21st century Britain, the fifth, sixth, richest country in the world. And we're supposed to feel proud of that. And you're just like, we cannot, because it is almost, it's fictional. If someone was to have written this story 10 years ago, they would have said, no. Do you know what I mean? Unless you're doing it as a comedy. It's too fictional. It's almost going down science fiction, and then to top it all up, as Tosh McDonald said at the Shildon Festival the other day, we then end up with the very person who we know should be sitting in number 10 and is already wearing a number 10 shirt and fed our children while the pandemic was happening. And his name's Marcus Rashford. That's who should be running the country. That's who cares for our children. that he cares for his communities, not what we've currently got. It is appalling. It's a really sad indictment. It's a horrific indictment of 21st century Britain.
I think there's a real slap in the face as well with relating to the kind of cladding that was at Grenfell. Recently, there was a developer called Ballymore who'd been criticised for not removing this style cladding off of their buildings. Now, what I think is fictional, like you said, absolutely ridiculous, out of this world, is the fact that Ballymore is the same developer that is responsible for building the Sky Pool in Nine Elms in London. That pool that stands between two skyscrapers for rich people to swim in the middle of the sky, the first sky pool in the world. And you're telling me that you want to say you're saving money on this kind of cladding on poor people's buildings, but you have enough money to put up a pool in the middle of the sky for rich people. And it's if that's not a slap in the face saying we don't care about poor people in this country, I don't really know what is.
I think we've gone from a welfare state to a careless state. They just simply don't care. That's a pretty great slogan there. I think we should use that again in the future. Jane, as someone like kind of, you've sat and listened to that, and Yvette said it's like fiction, but for me, although it's like it sounds like it should be fiction, I could also see this happening. As soon as like this all happened, I was still saying to Laura, who my wife Laura was saying, they will not be housed. They'll not be housed for years. They won't be looked after. These people won't be looked after. And we could see that at the time when, you had Theresa May going and appearing on TV with some firefighters and stood there, and she looked like she'd never met a human before. She was just looked completely out of place. You had Jeremy Corbyn was down there hugging people and what have you, and being a human being. And she was doing that, and then I was just thinking, they're not going to deal with this, and they're not going to care, and it's going to go away, and someone's going to forget about this. Did you get that feeling as well, Jane?
Yeah, I mean, I remember that she said that they'd house everyone within 3 weeks, didn't she?
Yep.
And I think that's what this government does a lot. They grab the headlines, we're going to do this, and no one ever follows up on the fact that they haven't. So for a vast amount of the population, they think that's happened because someone said it's going to happen. And I think that's a lot of the reason why this goes under the radar. And I think even I've been disappointed in just how awful they've been about this, because you just don't imagine that human beings will treat each other in this way. To think that cladding, I mean, it shouldn't be legal, but it's still legal now. They've done nothing about it. There's people having no choice but to live in places that are surrounded in this flammable cladding. And even homeowners are now being told to foot the bill after developers have walked off with huge amounts of money by profiting through these shortcuts, and homeowners are being asked to pay to replace it themselves. And I wanted to mention something that Neil Terry put in the comments as well, because I've seen a lot of times the fire brigade's been questions on why did you tell people to stay in their flats, and they told people to stay in their flats because that should normally be the right thing to do. They had no idea this flammable cladding was around the building. It's not something that should ever have happened. No one had told them, and you just wouldn't imagine it would happen. So the advice they were giving was right if some psychopath hadn't put flammable cladding all around the building. So it just makes it even more distasteful that they've tried to blame this on the firefighters. And I remember reading about the Grenfell Action Group at the time, the residents group that was in there, and they had been raising issues for a long time beforehand. They had raised the issue that there weren't sprinklers, they didn't feel safe. They even said that the only way that the people in charge of the building would ever take responsibility was when there was a huge fire and people died. They said it 6 months, I think, before the fire happened. So it was, they raised the alarm on this. And I remember also them saying that they were putting in freedom of information requests, and then they stopped having those processed, and saying that had they had access to the information they were asking for, they'd have found out about the cladding and been able to have said something about it. So you have to wonder whether that was deliberately being, to what extent people responsible realised how dangerous that cladding was, and why were they hiding that information if not?
And I think you mentioned freedom of information. So freedom of information is only applicable to public services. So once it goes over once it's procured out, actually that's what the tenant management organisation was reporting back to the tenants, that they were not tied or bound by the Freedom of Information Act. And I think that is a simple act that should have been amended yesterday, where if you are providing a public service, private or public, you should be tied by that act. And they can do the same with the public sector equality duty as well. Just because something goes over into private hands, it's still a service that we have to access, and they should be bound by the same things. I think the other thing around Grenfell is we have to remember the Lacanau House fire, which happened in 2009, which predicted many of the things that happened at Grenfell. And actually, Gavin Barwell sat on those recommendations in the House of Commons for years and then got promoted. So, you know, Lacanau House was a huge warning. It may have prevented Grenfell if they had acted on those recommendations.
So do you think people are actually interested in this? Because like earlier on you mentioned we've got all these things and you talked about privatisation, and I mentioned the fact that it's really capitalism that's leading to this. Firstly, do you think people understand what we mean by that when we're saying that these problems are systemic? It's the whole system that's causing the problem, you know, and how, I suppose I'm asking, and I don't know if anyone can fully explain this because it is hard and it is complex, but how is it that this system that we are living under, that we've lived under for a couple of 100 years now, is leading to these, like, you know, these awful events, these awful disasters, and, you know, and people living in poverty and all these things? What is it about it? What's linking these things together? And I guess that's just an open question to anyone who wants to come in. Klaudia, you're looking ready.
It's because I had a thought, but then I was like, I don't even understand if I understood the question properly, but I'm going to attempt my explanation.
It was a rambly question. I do apologise.
So I would say that the reason for this is because we're obviously trying to implement capitalism onto a state in which people aren't equal. Obviously, equality isn't a thing. We've tried to implement capitalist ways onto a society where you've got a very poor community of poor people and then a very rich community of rich people. And the further you try to exacerbate capitalism on those communities, the gap between the rich and the poor just grows further. I feel like I've understood this question wrong. No one nodded once at anything I said, so I'm like, no. I'm
nodding. It's just I'm far away.
I'm far away, so I can't hear the nod. Yeah, so obviously as the gap between the rich and the poor gets bigger, there's the 1% consumes all of the wealth that they can, and once they consume all of the wealth that they have up there, they slowly start to consume the little wealth that we have amongst ourselves, and whether that's in the form of gentrification or whatever. That's my explanation. Don't understand it anymore.
Do you think though that people understand what is going on with capitalism? Because like I've seen working class people who've got no capital whatsoever going, capitalism's the only way, and really, really going out there and defending it because they've seen some video from some tit from America who's just like saying anything, you know, like, I don't know, one of those YouTube people who just talk and they say, oh yeah, you know, socialism's really evil, and you're like, do you know what socialism is? Do you know what capitalism is? Do you know how to compare them? Like, looking after one another isn't evil, and, you know, the ability to have, like, the fact that you have wealth, that you have capital generating more wealth is not inherently good, you know. It's not a good thing, it's not a good system, and certainly, like, it's not even like if you look back to Adam Smith or something like that, what he thought capitalism was at the time, it's not like that anymore. It's just like, right, any bit of profit we can squeeze out of a situation, if there's anything we can do to make your life worse, to make us richer, then we'll do it, and that's problematic. Yeah,
I agree. I think though that you know, capitalism needs us as workers. That's what it's based on, and I think that the more they can exploit us, actually, it's become a thing where the more profit they will make, And I think if you look at, whether it's kind of, the breakdown of the unions, where we have to kind of really go to the extremes now to get a decent, day's pay for a decent day's work. I think, you've got, private, the public, what was once public industry is now private industry. So, they're kind of, treating people even worse. People, we've got a welfare state that, you really cannot buy a loaf of bread and feed your children properly, which is why we've got so many people in work, getting in work benefits to help them just live a normal day. So I think it's extra exploitation, because you've got a bourgeois that is kind of more and more greedy. And I think that how we pull back, we need to discuss how we pull back from that, because there are more of us than them. And I liken it to, the Atlantic slave trade. My parents are from the Caribbean, and I liken it to that. There are more of us than there are of them, but they just they are so greedy that they will go to extremes to exploit us. And the more they exploit us, the more broken down we are. The more broken down we are, that takes away sometimes our energy to just keep up the fight. And, we can't be angry about each other around that, because we are fighting for some really basic things: a decent and safe home, feeding your children. These are basic human rights, but we're worn down fighting for them on a day-to-day basis because of, a category of greedy people who, they can't buy anymore. Branson's just gone up into space because he's got nothing better to do with his money. And I'd say, this is where we need to organise again. I think the unions are best placed to do that. But, they've been exploited, and, they've had the rug pulled underneath them, do you know what I mean, post kind of Thatcher. But we need to get that spirit again. And I think it's in each and every one of us. We need to organise. Stop talking about what they're doing wrong. Let's talk about what we can do. We need to organise.
I love that, and that segues into the next thing I want to talk about. So, well done. That was a brilliant link for me there. So what I wanted to talk about next is, are we talking about these things enough? Are we telling our stories, and are we displaying our vision? Now, at the minute, we've got a leader of the Labour Party that has made headlines for, being an alpaca attacker. And that seems to have been, he's decided that this alpaca is a really, it's the hill on which he wants to die, that this alpaca must die, and there's no other way to get to it because it had TB 4 years ago. And why are we talking about this? Why is he talking about this? There are bigger issues in this country than whether or not there is an alpaca. And I understand that other cows might get TB, and those cows might not live for an extra 2 months before they're slaughtered. But, these are the things that he's talking about. Why are the left, and I use it very, very loosely for Keir Starmer, the Llama Harmer, why are the left talking about things like that rather than talking about big ideas about how we're going to solve this? And I think the fact that we aren't is probably why Boris Johnson can come on with a stupid thing like get Brexit done, and everyone's like, well, at least it's something to get behind. Because, obviously there were a lot of ideas that weren't put out in the media under the previous Labour leader that were kind of good ideas. But we aren't making those arguments. We aren't making those underlying arguments. And I suppose, is that something that you think that we need to do when we get together? Jane, I'm going to stop rambling now. Sorry.
Oh, you're never rambling. Yeah, we do. It's really difficult because I think the left felt very united for a long time when Corbyn was leading the Labour Party. So that was something to focus energy on, and to think we've got this whole programme that's going to solve just about every big issue that I can think of that keeps me awake at night. And now I think obviously it's a different situation. I think there are some people who aren't talking about the important issues because I can only guess that they're, so out of touch and distance and genuinely don't know what it's like for people, and they've got a very distorted view of what reality is for lots of people. And I think the rest of us, I think we feel so torn. There's, I'd have to sit here and think for a few minutes to write down all of the huge life destroying issues that worry me that are going on right now. There are so many problems, and there's not just one thing I can focus on that's going to fix any of them. And to be honest, I don't know if there's one thing I can fix on that's going to fix any one of them. I feel a bit lost knowing what to do. And then you've got this you've got a media in this country that portrays things in a certain way, which is I don't often find very honest. The mainstream media, I mean, I think they hide a lot of things purposely. They tell outright lies very often, and they distort things. So it's a huge thing to be up against when you're just one little person. So we really need to be organised, but I'm not quite sure how to do that to the extent that we need to quickly enough.
Klaudia, you're involved in the press and everything, and you the IMA, you're pretty heavily regulated. You've got to be regulated by someone, whether that's in press or there's a certain level of standard that you need to involve there. Do you see that that's like a standard that isn't really universal?
I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, obviously you've got the mainstream media is either regulated by Ofcom or IPSO, and there's constantly, like, we've got independent media partner called Hacked Off who's constantly putting out reports about IPSO failing to hold an organization accountable, or only holding an organization accountable 4 years after the mistake was made. Quite frankly, I think the mainstream media by their regulators are treated the exact same way that Boris Johnson is treated by Keir Starmer, which is little more than a slap on the wrist. They just get told, oh yeah, you did bad, but no one actually picks up on it. And that's because the mainstream media is a mouthpiece for the Conservative government. So realistically, if IPSO was to regulate the mainstream media, it's like they're regulating the government. And I'm sure they don't want to get into that, but you are correct in saying that at the Independent Media Association, so our partners have to be either regulated by Impress or the NUJ, or be a part of the NUJ. They also have to basically prove to us that they don't have any corporate funding or any form of government funding, which obviously lets us know that they're free from any kind of third-party control, and they just report what they want to report. I think, picking up on what Jay said about the mainstream media lying all the time, I think the problem with that is, obviously, media in the UK likes to claim that it's impartial. It likes to say, oh, we have no bias, we report both sides of the story, I think personally, complete impartiality is bullshit. We're human. Everyone has an opinion. We all sway one way or another, whether it's you're just emotional towards a certain topic. The problem isn't you having a bias on a topic. The problem is when you as an organization tell your audience, I am not unbiased, this is 100% neutral, I'm not taking a side. Obviously, there are a few people in the world who aren't as aware of what's going on or aren't as involved in the media and stuff like that to be aware of their tricks or how they do their reporting. So they simply take whatever the mainstream media has taken them as fact and the truth, not realizing that they're then letting the mainstream media shape their own opinion. Now, a lot of our independent media partners, you've got left-wing organizations, you've got more organizations who are more neutral, you've got organizations that don't get involved in party politics. The thing that they all have in common is they let you know what their standpoint is. You can go onto the organization's page, or you can read one of the articles, and you can straight away see, right, this is a left-wing organization, they've let me know that they're left-wing, and then you can take in their work knowing that they've got a left-wing bias on that story, and then you can make your own decision based on the information that they're providing you. But I do think that even someone in the comments, I think, said that it's very difficult to unite or something like that when you've got a mainstream media that lies to you, and that is very true, because obviously a lot of people in the UK don't realize that we've got a growing and strong community of independent media organizations. I personally, until I started working for the IMA or Bywire, I thought there was like 6. I was like, yep, I know like the top ones. I know the Canary, Byline Times, Open Democracy. Yep. didn't know any past that, but there is hundreds. There's so many different organizations where you can get your news from, and when you start actually looking in their direction rather than giving any of your time to the mainstream media, it does open up that door to a community that lets you kind of unite and come together and just basically be aware of the lies of the mainstream media, and more importantly, the lies of the government.
Yay. I wanted to stand up and applaud there. Yvette, I guess like there was this stuff that was mentioned by Jane there about like she doesn't know what we could get behind and what sort of thing. Is there anything you think that we could get behind, like as a left?
For me, we did it before in terms of Thatcher's poll tax. That stands out for me. And I think in current day, we have to look at Chile as an example and what's happening there at the moment. They're managing to get rid of Pinochet's constitution by just, and that started mainly with kind of teachers, lecturers, and then students that kind of went on, who had been impacted by like the closure of kind of schools and colleges and that. So I think there is about us organising, and it only takes small groups of people to kind of get together. I cannot comment on Keir. I think he should know better. He should do better, and he should just move on. We cannot have a leader of a socialist party in Britain that isn't left. I mean, is ambidextrous at best. And we can't have that now. So I think actually he would do better kind of looking at some zoology post where he does look after alpacas, because he certainly doesn't know how to lead left people in this country, and he's making things worse for us, because while he's playing about with alpacas or whatever else and refusing to take the knee and seeing Black Lives Matter as a moment, actually Boris is pushing through all sorts of shit that is making our lives worse. So he has to go. Let's start with that. But I think we need to organise as well. We can't put all our efforts into just getting him to go. We have to organise, and I do have to use Chile as an example of that and what's happening there today.
The question is, would they be safe if he was looking after the alpacas? I don't think so.
Well,
I think
alpacas have rights too.
I think he's got a hint that the alpaca was a socialist, so he wanted rid. So is Labour? Like, I suppose we're going into the Labour. I've done it. It's like a swear box, but I always say that we don't really like mentioning Labour on Socialist Think Tank because Labour's been less and less socialist lately. But like, is Labour a socialist party in your opinion? Just like a kind of short thing from each of you, Jane.
Yeah, for me, Labour is the members, and for me, the members that I know are socialist, and I think the vast majority are socialist. Leaders come and go. Yeah, we're a socialist party as far as I'm concerned.
Do you think the current leadership of the Labour Party thinks the Labour Party is its members?
No, it seems very clear that they don't think the members have a place in the party.
That's exactly how I feel. Klaudia, what about you?
Do I have to say anything else? Because Jane summed it all up.
She nailed it, hasn't she? Yeah.
Nodded our head like, yep, that's the one. So
yeah, it'd be unfair not to give you a shot of it, but yeah, you happy enough?
I'm happy with that. I'm just gonna repeat what she said, but put it in my own stuff. I mean, so there's no point.
Yeah, I think we know. Yeah, the real revolutionaries move in silence.
Yeah. So, with regards to anything that can unite the left, there's a couple of things that I actually quite think will help the left, and one is that small scale organising. I think Ems has mentioned it in the comments about working in your communities, that small scale organising. But at the same time, you've got to go big as well. You've got to have big ideas. And I think the small scale organising shows people how to live together with one another in communities, and you help out there. For me, the thing that's got cut through is billionaires, and no one wants to talk about them in the press. No one wants to talk about how big a billion is. And I know that like friends of mine who aren't interested in politics are furious that billionaires exist. They are furious that Jeff Bezos or Richard Branson fly up to space, and especially Branson with NHS money after having sued the NHS, and then he's like, yeah, but I'm going to go to space. Or Bezos actually literally, like, I'm sure that penis wasn't an accident that he flew up in. Like, it was definitely a penis. And he's going, look at me, I'm flying up to space in a penis. And, you know, that's what they think of us. That's what billionaires think of us. They hate us, don't they? They hate us. We're there to service them. We're there, and they'll be all right either way. And I think that's the thing that people can get behind, and people who are, you know, what? Klaudia, you're looking ready there.
I just had the best analogy ever for how billionaires view. Right, you know the movie Ant's Life? Is it Ant's Life? And you've got the crickets, and they're like, the guy crickets gets really annoyed, and he's like to all of his cricket guys, and he's like, shut up. All of you guys are laughing at how small those ants are, but the moment they realize there's more of them than there is of us, we're fucked. And that's, do you know what I mean? It's like another reason why we should unite. I just had that analogy come into my head. That's why.
Yeah, and I think it's the idea of that small scale thing is to try to make people realize that they're on the same side. Like, the definition of workers is really weird as well, because that's like people think that they're not a worker. I don't know. We're being pushed around by middle leaders, and I've done this a lot in my life. Like, so I've got my NASUWT t-shirt on today. Like, I've been a school rep for years and years, and every time it's the kind of what's happening in the Labour Party at the minute. Every time we win, you'll get the management types kind of trying to undermine you for a nice period of time afterwards. And then kind of saying, actually, no, it's not going to work. If you collectivise, that's a really bad thing. And actually, that's the reason that you weren't promoted last time and stuff like that. And they try and do that. And I can see that in the Labour Party at the minute. It's like, actually, being a socialist in the Labour Party isn't a good idea if you want to be an MP or anything. So why don't you toe the line and stop saying those radical things and maybe, like, you know, talk to the billionaires and maybe get some money from them and start saying, actually, it's not that bad to pollute things. And, you know, and then they get into this spiral, and it's this awful kind of like middle management bullshit. But yeah, so I don't know. What do you think about billionaires, Yvette?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think if we're going to talk about fair and equal society, then actually there should be nothing wrong with billionaires being taxed appropriately, and why they cannot seem to find something where they can't get where they have loopholes all the time for these people to get through, when they can find hundreds and thousands of people every year who are fiddling their universal credit. So it's kind of, you know, they're not interested. Put in a proper scheme, tax them properly, see how they feel. They'll probably leave anyway. But I think what you've just said about kind of, you know, the Labour Party in terms of that, you know, careerist kind of management structure, and to shut your mouth if you ever want to move on or move up. I think that's reflected through the workplace, and that is the culture. And as you've said before, it's systemic in our culture. Otherwise, it's that know your place thing. You can only get there on our say-so. And by our say-so, you have to do particular things. You have to, as we call it in the Black community, you have to sell out. You have to sell out. You know, otherwise you stay where you are. And actually preventing you from moving where you want to go through is the least they do. The worst they do is they kill you. Okay? They set fire to your home.
Yeah.
So, you know, sorry to be so dismal, but, you know, it is all the way through. And so what we've got a party of careerists, really, who, you know, often are in seats where they don't know anything about the communities that they're representing anyway. So nothing gets done for the people there. They don't spend time in their communities. They spend most of their time in Hogwarts. Do
you think anyone with a bad boss who's ever had a bad boss saw this coming a mile off? Because I kind of did, and I don't know, it just reminded me of a bad boss, because I see like the Conservatives have been like the people who own the company, and the people who are in charge of the structures of the Labour Party appear to be like the middle management or the bad boss kind of figure. You know,
Well, I think I can talk from
not too many workers?
experience. I think I can talk from experience because I worked under Keir, because I worked for the CPS for 14 years.
Ah, oh, we need to speak at length on this.
We do. So, you know, there's a leader and there are skills that go with leadership. And, you know, it isn't just being in a position. You know, leadership skills are about kind of, you know, listening to people, you know, having some empathy with people, you know, pulling people up to their potential, et cetera, et cetera. And, I mean, I wasn't on his interviewing panel because he wasn't interviewed. He was appointed into the DPP post. So I didn't see the person spec for that. But, you know, would I say he had those skills? Possibly not. I didn't even know I didn't even know he was on the left when he was DPP.
I still don't.
We look at some of the things that happened there, you know, the joint enterprise, you know, dare I mention Julian Assange, you know, come on.
Actually, that's a really good point as well. Should we be talking more about people like Julian Assange as well? We're talking about like the media, we're talking about justice, and we've got a man who is in this an absolutely remarkable position. You know, Klaudia, are you up to date on this case?
Yeah, I've actually, do you know what? I've been at Julian Assange protests from like before I started working at the IMA or Bywire. I wasn't even clued up on the independent media when I went. I just heard the story and I was... so for anyone who isn't familiar with the Julian Assange story, even though I kind of expect everyone to be, Julian Assange is basically a man who reported the truth and exposed the war crimes of the United States government, and now he's a political prisoner of theirs here in the UK, awaiting extradition to the United States. So obviously in January his extradition did not get put through. Now I would love to say that I didn't get put through because the UK found some empathy and decided that it's the wrong thing to do, but the matter of the fact is the only reason the judge said that he was not going to get extradited is because he was on the brink of committing suicide, and his health was just on the edge because he's in a maximum security prison where you've got rapists, murderers, and pedophiles, and all the man has done is post a video on where the United States military are seen shooting down civilians and young children, and he's in that prison. COVID had happened. He's not allowed. I'm pretty sure he was in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, 1 hour out outside. And yeah, so they didn't extradite him in January because they were scared that he would basically commit suicide if this was to go through. Now, the hearing happened again, was it yesterday or the day before, where basically the United States government has appealed to try and get him extradited again. And the appeal has basically been extended. So the next hearing is going to be in October to see if he is going to get extradited to the United States. Now, if he gets extradited to the United States, he's facing around 175 years in prison for several charges. None of which I would say are accurate because, like I keep repeating, all the man did was report the truth, like a lot of journalists, I would say, nowadays don't do. I think if we allow Julian Assange to be extradited and go to prison for what he has done, then we are allowing both the United States government and the UK government to crack down on press freedom and completely attack journalism for what it should be. Because journalism is about reporting the truth and holding power to account. And that's exactly what Julian Assange did. So if we allow him to go to prison, then it just goes to show how little those in power care about. Obviously, they don't want to be held accountable for what they're doing. So they're just trying to eradicate any source that is able to do that. And WikiLeaks, which is obviously the organization that Julian Assange exposed the video under, does exactly that. WikiLeaks is a space for whistleblowers to expose those in power as well as journalists. And we need more organizations like that. Obviously, we've got a few, but yeah, free Julian Assange is all I have to say on that topic.
Yeah, I'm happy to back that one as well. And if you look at someone like Edward Snowden as well, who was charged under an Espionage Act, because and the like, if you looked into the law of what that actually meant, that meant passing vital information to your enemies, and he gave it to the people. That says a lot, doesn't it? Like, you know, that giving something to the people of your country is seen as an act of giving something to your enemies.
Do you know what, actually picking up from on that as well, you've recently got the revision, the government wants to revise the Official Secrets Act, which is basically going to criminalize journalists who use sources that they consider not appropriate, or basically leaks. Any journalism that uses a leak from a whistleblower, a leak of information, can be criminalized the same way as a spy. And to me, that kind of shows that there is no hope for Julian Assange, because if that's the kind of law that they're trying to push through, then we shouldn't really be too hopeful about what they're going to do with Assange. But it's also a law that I literally saw people talking about on social media for a day, and then the government did another clusterfuck, did something ridiculous, and everyone forgot about it again. And I don't think it's something that we should be just brushing under the carpet, because we're already seeing it happen with Assange. And also recently a UK blogger / journalist, you've got Craig Murray, who also been arrested. So this is something that's already happening, despite the fact that the law hasn't actually been passed through fully. So yeah, I think it's something that should be at the forefront of our minds.
Didn't he get 8 months? Didn't he? Craig Murray got 8 months for, and they cited what Tommy Robinson did as precedent. Yeah, that's right. Because they said that, like, because he'd what's it called when they can sort of piece together from lots of different articles.
It was so basically what had happened is he had reported on a story, I forgot what politician it was, about how he had sexually assaulted a series of women. And what he had done is basically, in the series of blog posts that he had written, if a third party, someone who's unfamiliar with the story, was to look at all of the stories together, they would be able to basically put all the pieces of the puzzle together and figure out who the victims were. And so it's called jigsaw identification. Basically that can put him in contempt of court if the victims can be identified in that. But I just think, again, that's just the slap in the face, because you've got he's a blogger, he's a freelance journalist, he's someone that does this kind of thing on his own, and he still went and pleaded guilty for what he had done. He acknowledged what he did wrong. And then you've got people like the Times, or the Times the other day did a report about the deportation flight to Jamaica, and the headline was something like, Diane Abbott doesn't support the deportation of pedophiles, murderers and rapists, and they used the picture of her in that, just like as the thingy, and it made it look like she was a pedophile, rapist or whatever. And you've got mainstream media outlets who are not being held accountable for any of the mistakes that they make on a day-to-day basis, but yet you've got someone who's said, right, I've made a mistake, and he's being punished immediately, and it's become all the mainstream media outlets are picking up on it, like, yeah, oh my god, look at what he did, what a mistake.
The MP was Alex Salmon.
There you go, thank you very much.
Yeah. Also as well, like, didn't they say that it was accidental, and they accepted that he hadn't meant to use the jigsaw identification. He hadn't deliberately left breadcrumbs and been like, ha 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 ha, and no one ever did identify who it was. So actually there was no victim in the end either. Like, they didn't work out who the person was, but they thought there was enough evidence, if you pieced it together, for him to have accidentally given it away, and he got 8 months. Like, that's insane.
I don't think anyone in their right mind would, like, unless you're a psychopath, would sit there and be like, right, I'm going to put this piece of information in this blog, then this piece of information in this blog, just so if anyone's like, no, what? Do you know what I mean? It's like a really it's like a jigsaw type movie thing to do, like the movie Saw. It's like you really plot it out. You want someone to figure it out. On the topic of Craig Murray as well, it was actually quite devastating for us to hear what happened at the IMA, because literally 3 days prior to the news, we had scheduled a meeting for him to come and be a partner at the Independent Media Association, and then we got the news, and it was just like, oh fuck, like.
Yeah. Solidarity
Wasn't
to him,
he
I guess.
Sorry, Paul, wasn't he supposed to be going to Spain to give evidence in support of Julian Assange? And because he's in prison now, and he's the first person to ever be put in prison for this offence in this country, he now isn't at liberty to go to Spain and give evidence in that case. That's what I read. I'm sure I read that from Craig Murray's blog.
Maybe. Do you know what? I won't put anything past this government at this point. So, very, very much likely true. Like, you've got the government currently is trying to crack down on all of our civil liberties, whether that's the Official Secrets Act, or you've got the Crime and Policing Bill as well, which is just I don't know how. Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's not like we've literally got draconian powers coming in right in front of our eyes, and people are just. I'm not saying people are letting it happen, because you've got the Kill the Bill protests happening all across the country, but the government is currently constantly throwing distractions at us to throw us off track and make us think about something else.
In the comments, people have actually, it was quite interesting. I don't know if anyone picked up on this. There was a bit of a to and fro going on about GB News. What do you think about GB News and their right to go and do what they do? Like, even if they're saying some quite odd things, do they have a right to be part of the media? That's for anyone, really.
Do you know what? Yeah, because if we're going to let left-wing organisations have this, yeah, but the problem is that the mainstream isn't letting predominantly left-wing organisations have their say. They're being like, yeah, you can have your say, but they're not giving them the platform to do it. That's why the independent media is so determined to try and reinforce our credibility as organisations, because right, GB News got formed like this, and it's a very right-wing platform, but it automatically got a certified place in the mainstream. And I wouldn't personally say that there's a strictly left-wing socialist organization in the mainstream media that's got that kind of the same kind of influence as GB News does, or the same kind of credibility. So I want to say, yeah, it does have a right to exist, but only if you put an alternative organization on the same kind of pedestal as you're putting GB News. And there isn't that right now. So you've just got a right-wing organization pumping a bunch of bullshit at people, quite frankly, with one or two presenters that are left-wing, but then they literally leave or get fired immediately because they're just not fitting the agenda that GB News wants. So
yeah, especially if it's like Gloria De Piero, Gloria De Piero. Yeah, that's... It's because it's just interesting that people and as well. Did you see what was reported as an anti-vax rally the other day, where they went to the wrong place and they went to Shepherd's Bush, which doesn't really do the BBC anymore? But it wasn't an anti-vax rally; it was an anti-vaccine passport rally. There were left-wing people on that rally, and there were right-wing people on that rally, and there were people who were going, actually, vaccine passports are a really bad idea. And I actually think that's true, because there's a couple of reasons vaccine passports are a really bad idea. One is because it's a really, really dark step towards identifying people. And the other thing is as well, is you can still get COVID if you've had the vaccine. They're not even saying that it's any less likely that you get it. It's just better for you. You're much more likely to be able to fight it. So it's not like you get there and you're not going to spread it. If it was like smallpox or something like that, where it actually got rid of the disease permanently, then yeah, I could understand that you would want everyone to do it. But surely it's that's not what we're talking about. So why did they report that as an anti-vaxxer rally when it was an anti-vaccine passport rally?
I think it's just simple. They pick up those ideas to kind of show that we're a bunch of stupids, that we can't even get the correct address. And it is kind of to detract from why we're really there. It's distraction tactics. It's just, you know what I mean? That's what grabs the headlines. Look at this stupid bunch of people. They're demonstrating against something silly because we've told them this and they're not believing us. We don't believe Boris Johnson is a liar. and do you know what I mean, they can't get it right. Would you follow these people? So that's a way of also controlling other people. Like, don't listen to them because they can't even get a venue right. So it is it's people management. It's not politics. It's managing the populace to keep us in our place.
And okay, I'm going to move on to one last bit of story here, which is the Ken Loach story, and I'm going to go into it via the path of stories. So we've spoken quite a lot on this show about how important it is to tell the stories of the left, and sometimes it's much easier to access if you're watching that through a film like I, Daniel Blake or something like that. And now you're seeing like someone like Ken Loach being expelled from the Labour Party. What do we think? What do we think of Ken Loach being expelled from the Labour Party? Ken Loach was we were nearly going to be able to get him on the phone, but he's had a really, really busy day. He is going to do something for Socialist Think Tank quite soon, I believe. So solidarity to Ken from us at Socialist Think Tank. What do the rest of the panel think about what's happening with Ken Loach, and does it actually matter? Jane?
Of course it does. Of course it matters. And I think it's really, I'm a member of the Labour Party, and I think, for me, it really questions more than I have done over the last year and a half, whether that really is the place for me, whether I have the patience to hang in there and hope for change. Because, if Ken Loach, who not only understands us, has fought for us, but actually gets our stories out there in a real way that people can kind of understand and see eye to eye with. What are they going to do to me? That's my question. Because I've not made any films. I don't have Ken Loach's thinking. Do you know what I mean? I have great admiration for the man, and if he's not what they want as a member, well, surely there has to be hundreds, if not thousands, of us in the party who they don't want either.
Jane, what do you think?
I think it's a huge injustice. I think it's a really sad thing for the party. I don't know what to do. I think my feeling is that I should stay, and I need to try and work towards positive change. And I hope that we can overturn this, and that if at some stage Ken would be happy to rejoin the company, given how badly the party, given how badly he's been treated, then he should be asked to rejoin the party and receive a huge apology. So maybe that's idealistic, but that's what I'd like to hope might happen at some stage in the future. Just what he's contributed to society, what he did with Kathy Come Home and I, Daniel Blake, and So We Missed You, and so much more. It's just ridiculous to have chucked him out on some, spurious grounds.
Klaudia, what do you think about this? I don't know if you're a party member of any description, but what do you think?
I'm not actually a party member, but I would say if I was a party member, I'd be a member of the Labour Party. But I do think that this is just a step in the wrong direction for the Labour Party. And obviously there's a lot of division as it is within the Labour Party right now. And just people, the Labour Party voters and members are just losing hope in the Labour Party because of Keir Starmer. And I just feel like this is just another stepping stone to take them into the completely wrong direction and just kind of lose. Labour's constantly losing support, and I just feel like this is just going to take it even further, and it's just something that we don't need. But like Jane said, this is just something that you have to look for the positive in this and try and get people to unite again. Hopefully, maybe, do you know what? It might spark up so much anger in people that people get so pissed off. They're just like, right, no, we're the Labour Party, but fuck Keir. Pardon my language, but fuck Keir. So hopefully it does turn that way. But right now, the way the Labour Party is going, I hate to say it, but I highly doubt that that's what's going to happen.
I think it should be forced to come back, or they should be forced to make sure he comes back. I think we should then force them to put him in as leader of the party and have Marcus Rashford as his shadow deputy leader.
Yeah, let's get Rashford involved. So, like, I've got a little story about Ken Loach, and Ken Loach is a really ordinary person. Given like he's won the Palme d'Or twice, which is like this huge prize for directors. He's obviously amazing. He's massively acclaimed. And a couple of years ago, one of the people who ran the soup kitchens, or as they called them, the free cafes in Easington during the miners' strike, Myrtle McPherson, she died. And who turned up to the funeral? Ken Loach, friend of the family. Can you imagine anyone at the moment who's like in charge of, who's a big director, who's that acclaimed, turning up in Easington, which is a tiny little pit village where they filmed part of Billy Elliot and stuff, and like he was there, you know, he's just knocking around in the funeral at the Colliery Club, where I used to go, like, well, I've gone for years, and when I was younger. Can you imagine people doing that? And is that really what's wrong here? Is it someone who can relate to real people and they're just like talking to one another and going, actually, I don't really like him because he speaks to humans who we don't necessarily want to associate with? I don't know. That may be a harsh question.
He's not your ideal billionaire. That's probably why he's not your. I mean, he's not money greedy. Yeah. So they're like, nah.
Yeah. Could this be a good thing for the Labour Party? Do you think the Labour Party, given the state that it's in at the moment, like there's no money, they've got rid of it. Do the left want the Labour Party back? It's got no money, and if I speak to people around my area, most people hate the Labour Party, hate Keir Starmer, hated Corbyn because the mainstream media told them to hate Corbyn, and a lot of the Labour Party members of Parliament told them to hate Corbyn, especially my old MP used to go around saying, like, you know, actively telling them to hate Corbyn. Do the left want this bankrupt party that a lot of people hate? I don't know.
I want it back.
I think the hard thing is that, like, you might say, oh yeah, no, we don't want the Labour Party back. It's easier to start a completely new party, a left-wing party, focus our attention elsewhere. But if we're being completely honest with ourselves, the UK is a two-party system, and if it ain't the Conservatives, then it's Labour. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like we've got to put all of that attention into Labour because no other party is going to make it into the best of both worlds scenario. So it's like we either it might be one of those scenarios where they have to, you know, when someone has to hit rock bottom to realize, right, we've got to get our shit together. I'm praying that that's what happens with the Labour Party. If they've got no money, they're losing all of their best MPs. Hopefully Starmer will hit rock bottom, realize, right, I'm not fit for the job, resign, someone else steps in his place, and it'll go from there. But
Yvette?
Yeah, I agree. And I just wanted to say, Paul, thanks for mentioning Myrtle's funeral, because she was on the women's banner that I saw at Chiltern. I met her daughter, Heather. That's history, that's communities. But I think I joined a Labour Party that I believed, you know, had come out of a working struggle, you know, out of unions, for us to have, do you know what I mean, not only better conditions, but to have better lives and livelihoods. And if the Labour Party has changed from that, then no one's let me know. I didn't get the memo. So it isn't the party. They're doing people management in the party. They're not doing politics. They're not doing Labour politics in the party. And there has to be a way that, and I do agree with Klaudia, I think it is about wearing them down so that they just go, they just get tired of it. The Labour Party should be what it was set up for. That's why we join. That's why we pay our membership. If it's changed, tell us it's changed. Change the constitution, and then we can make another decision. But at this current time, it is the party that I joined, and I need it to stay that way. I need the politics to be consistent in some way. And I can't have some jumped up, suit wearing, hair gelled up leader, do you know what I mean, taking it off in a different direction. And while we're here, where's the Ford inquiry?
I don't think that's going to see the light of day in any sort of way, shape, or form that people might find useful. Right, last 10 minutes now, so I want to end on something really, really positive here. I want to end on what we can do to help. How can we help the IMA? How can we help Justice for Grenfell? How can we help the left in general? So let's start with Klaudia. How do we help the IMA? How do we help independent media?
I mean, so the best thing you can do to support independent media is donate to independent media. If you head to the ima.press website, you'll find a list of all of our partners. Now, they don't just cover UK news. We've got partners that focus on news in Africa. We've got partners that focus on strictly Latin American news. Then we've got partners who do international news. But in the way that you can support the IMA is just get signed up on our mailing list via our website, or make sure you give us a follow on our socials. It's IMA_press on Twitter, and pretty sure it's the same on Instagram. Then also, you would also be supporting independent media if you make sure you give Bywire a follow, as what Bywire is trying to do is we're trying to basically bring all of the independent media UK on one singular platform, which is the Bywire website. On that website, we also then store the independent media content on the blockchain, a crypto blockchain, which basically gives our audience the certainty of accuracy and just an extra level of safety, as when something is stored on the blockchain, it means that the person who's created that piece of work can't go back and change it. So obviously you've got the debacle of Dominic Cummings, where he changed his emails to make them say something else, etc., etc. Our publishers can't do that. Everything's stored on the blockchain, so whatever they've said once, they're sticking by it. And it's there. And thanks to our great technology as well, if you read the content on Bywire News, you are actually able to make crypto tokens, which you can then donate to the independent media partners that we have got on our plugin. So it's obviously not a large amount of money, but every little helps, thanks to Tesco. So if you just follow us on socials, promote our work, just make sure you get independent media work out there. That's the best thing you can do. We need a bigger platform than we have right now, and we rely on social media. So
brilliant. Yvette, how do we help Justice for Grenfell?
Okay, bit of the same. Always donate so that we can keep going. There's a donate button on our website. Social media, always retweet, repost so that we keep it in the public eye. If you live somewhere where you have a building that has dangerous materials on it, organise locally, get hold of your MP, get on your local authorities' nerves. And if you are at Labour Party conference in Brighton this year, please come and see us at Fringe. We're on with Orgreave and Hillsborough. So all your support there would be great.
Absolutely brilliant, thank you. I'm going to do a shout out for Ems for the Better Public Transport campaign in Carmarthenshire. I hope I said that right. It's on the screen. Carmarthenshire, dear me, I'm terrible on it. Thank you so much. It's pronouncing everything wrong tonight. So yeah, thanks for that, Ems, and that's a really, really good campaign for better public transport. These are the things that we need, don't we? Because these are like green solutions, like the planet's warming up, and no one seems to care about that. They seem to care more about whether you should murder a llama. But anyway, sorry, alpaca. But yeah, I keep going on about that. I maybe should stop. Jane, how do we unite the how do we do things that just generally on the left, or anything you want to say? Really, I'm not going to pressure you.
So there's so much going on at the moment. That is a huge question, but there's so much really pernicious legislation being put through Parliament right now, and really attacking our human rights and civil liberties. But one of the things that I think is going to be hardest for future government to undo or reverse is what's being done to the NHS right now. I think what's being done to the NHS with the privatisation, the corporate takeover bill, which they're calling the health and care bill, that will put private companies on the boards of NHS decision-making bodies, portion the NHS up into regional bodies, so you don't have parity of treatment across the country, contracts behind closed doors going out, for whatever money spent on however that little group with the private companies on the board thinks fit. So you might not necessarily get services in certain regions that people genuinely need. So dangerous. And I imagine the way that we'd be tied into these contracts would cost enough to bankrupt the country for a future Labour government to get us out of it. So there's a lot of campaigns going on around that. We Own It, Just Treatment, Every Doctor. I think, there's a lot of stuff in the independent media, I think, about what's going on too. So read up on that and get involved in those campaigns would be my advice.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to say thank you to everyone who's commented tonight. If I haven't mentioned you by name, thank you very much to you personally, because you have all appeared on the screen tonight. Mia's put a really, really good comment in there saying, I see the importance of civil liberties on COVID-related issues. She supported the lockdown to contain the virus. Whoa. Sorry. Daddy Longlegs. On COVID-related issues are the same people who told us the rest of us should forgo our civil liberties because under the war on terror, they don't care about civil liberties until it's their own civil liberties at stake. It's so that was quite an important comment there, and there've been some really, really outstanding comments tonight. So thank you for watching. If you can do us a massive favour and like us on everything, like so Twitter. Follow us on that, like us on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to us on YouTube. And if you want to become a member of Socialist Think Tank, you can become a member for free. We do accept donations as well. You can make that a monthly donation if you can afford it. It doesn't get you anything extra as part of Socialist Think Tank, because we are socialists and we don't think you should pay for the right to be involved. We are starting to expand into different areas at the moment. We're looking at policies at the moment to act more like, so basically a think tank in the USA would be funded by a billionaire to find out what they wanted to find out. We are not funded by anyone, but we are powered by your brains. And if you tell us what you think, if you want to do some research, that will be absolutely brilliant. You can get yourself published on our website and look into policies that we could share with people in the public. We're looking at economics at the moment, which is going to be really exciting. We're going to have a series coming to you in the winter on economics, which should be really good and might help explain some of the things that we were talking about earlier on with capitalism and what the problems are, because it is pretty complex. And we want to make sure that really, at the basic of it, it's not really complex, but it is deliberately, misleadingly complex so that people don't understand it and people don't have an opinion. We care about your opinion, so if you wanted to join us at socialistthinktank.com, you can become a member, and welcome to the family if you do that, because it is starting to feel like a little family, isn't it, Jane? It's quite nice in Socialist Think Tank world.
Yeah. It's a lovely community, really supportive, lovely community. Do join.
Hey. So thank you to all of you again. So thank you to you, Klaudia, for coming on. You've been absolutely outstanding. We will definitely be watching you on everything you're on. You've been on about 1 million podcasts this week, haven't you?
I've been, do you know what? This week it's been my first time appearing on them though. I have to do, because obviously I do the show with Dan for Bywire every Monday. And I did the Gist podcast on Wednesday, and then today I'm doing this. So yeah.
Yeah, becoming a superstar very, very quickly. And Yvette, you've been like touring the country doing speeches and stuff like that. So we're really, really honoured you came on. Thank you so much, and thank you for all that you do. It is noticed and it is appreciated. And I know sometimes the things that we do on the left aren't necessarily, it doesn't feel like that sometimes, does it? It feels like an uphill battle at times, but we really appreciate what you're doing. So thank you so much for coming on.
Pleasure.
And as always, Jane, I'm sure you'll be on again. Actually, open invite to everyone who's on here. You can come in and do my job for me if you want, because I've not been very good at it tonight. But I will, So thank you to everyone. I will see you all later. We'll stay on for a little debrief for about 2 minutes after this one, so you don't have to go anywhere yet, but we will be going offline now for everyone else. So thank you again, everyone. We will see you next time, and don't forget to share this video far and wide. And if you're listening to the audio podcast as well, write a little comment and tell us what you think, and we will see you again.
Keep the red flag flying here.